intention of annexing neighboring city-states to strengthen and expand the Peloponnesian League.
The most heinous allegation against him was that when he was attacking Argos, he lures as many, it said, as 6,000 Argive hoplites into a sacred grove. He then orders helots, note helots, not Spartans, to set light to a sacred grove, which then torches all those 6,000 Argives to death, for which he was put on trial when he came back into Sparta.
The charges were serious, and even the king wasn't exempt from Spartan law. Cleomenes faced the possibility of exile.
What was unacceptable was that this was another Greek city, a sacred grove, and the deception was therefore somehow sacrilegious. Nevertheless, he survived. He lived to fight another day, but he went on under a cloud.
In an effort to prevent his own exile, Cleomenes needed to eliminate the forces within the government that were against him. This meant eliminating his competition, that is, the other king of Sparta, Demaratus. To do this, Cleomenes bribed the oracle at Delphi to declare King Demaratus an illegitimate king. Demaratus was immediately deposed and sent into exile. But Cleomenes' treachery was quickly exposed, and he too ended up in exile. When Cleomenes eventually returned, he died a gruesome death by his own hand.
And the most extreme version is that he committed suicide by slicing himself from the feet upwards until he reached the vital organs.
Cleomenes, who would forever after be known as Cleomenes the Mad, was replaced by King Leonidas, a man who would take the Spartans where they had never gone before, into an ancient world war of epic proportions. At the dawn of the 5th century BC, an invisible line divided Greek city-states into two distinct groups, those that sided with Sparta and those that stood with Athens. While Sparta tried to maintain its hands-off policy towards warfare, Athens began preparing for the possibility of war with the Persians. There was news that Darius I of Persia was hell-bent on punishing the Athenians for supporting the failed revolt by Ionia in 499.
Darius never forgot about it, never forgot about that humiliation. The Greeks claimed that Darius, in fact, delegated a slave to whisper in his ear on a regular basis, "O king, never forget the Athenians."
In August 490 BC, Darius I dispatched a flotilla of ships carrying troops to attack the Athenians. The Persian expedition approached Marathon on the northeastern coast of Attica. It was much larger and better supplied than the Athenians thought they could handle.
When the Athenians realized that the Persians really were coming and were about to land at Marathon, they sent a runner down to Sparta. They had had mixed relations with Sparta, sometimes amicable, sometimes otherwise, but they certainly recognized that Sparta was the great military power in Greece.
As the story goes, the runner covered 140 miles in 2 days, only to be told by the Spartans that sending troops meant disrupting the Carnean festival, a religious ceremony sacred to Apollo. Sparta promised reinforcements when the festivities were over. 10 days later,
the Athenians have to send up their forces. They send every man they can, about 9,000 heavy armed infantrymen, and they square off against the Persian forces, who probably outnumber them by 2 or 3 to 1 at the plain of Marathon.
For several days, the Athenians and Persians eyed each other from afar in the hot August sun. Finally, with Spartan reinforcements nowhere in sight, Athenian General Miltiades ordered a surprise attack on the enemy.
The Persians are cut to ribbons. The heavy-armed Athenian hoplites proved to be more than a match for the light-armed Persian infantrymen, and there's just a massacre. Meanwhile, the Athenians have sent a runner back to Athens announcing their victory.
In the wake of the stunning Athenian success, the Spartans finally arrived with a hoplite force 2,000 strong, but there was nobody left to fight.
When the Spartan army finally gets to Marathon, the Athenians are happy to show them the corpses of the Persians whom the Athenians have handily defeated. So this was something the Spartans had to live down.
Meanwhile, the Persians began plotting their revenge. In 486 BC, Darius I chose his son Xerxes to be his successor. Xerxes carefully planned a new and far more elaborate invasion of Greece, a plan that would take years to put into place.
By 481-480, it's pretty clear that Xerxes has been mobilizing for a period of 4 years, an enormous force, perhaps as many as 250,000 men in his fleet and his land army, to come down into Greece proper.
And so the Spartans, Athenians, and a small contingent of city-states met to plan a counterattack. They argued over strategy before finally yielding to Spartan Admiral Eurybiades to command both ground and naval forces. It was a challenge he accepted on behalf of all Greece.
One, the Spartans are very arrogant. They say, by God, if these wimpy Athenians could defeat the Persians at Marathon, then just imagine what we, Spartans, can do. Two, the more sophisticated Spartans would say, I'm not all that afraid of the Persians, because although there are a lot of Persians, they are not particularly good infantry fighters, and we're the world's best infantry fighters.
By the spring of 480 BC, the stage was set. On the Persian side, 46 regional contingents under 30 generals were assembled for the invasion of Greece. They were led by Xerxes, known to both friend and foe as the Great King. The massive force numbered between 200,000 and 300,000 warriors.
Xerxes' armies will consume millions of gallons of fresh water daily. It will consume millions of pounds of wheat, fodder, meat.
At sea, approximately 750 warships called triremes were flanked by several hundred supply ships. The vast Persian navy moved in tandem with the ground forces. It was a war machine of unprecedented might, requiring masterful planning and execution at every turn.
The interdependence of the Persian army, the land army, and the Persian navy is really important in thinking about these wars. The army had to stay linked up with the navy because the navy guaranteed the safety of the supply ships.
The Greeks, accustomed to battles involving a few thousand men at most, would soon face an inexhaustible flood of enemy troops. After much debate about what to do, they decided to take a stand at Thermopylae, a scenic spot known as the Hot Gates because of bubbling sulfurous springs nearby. Thermopylae was the gateway to the south. In 480 BC, the pass at Thermopylae was barely 50 feet wide, a spot where Xerxes' enormous advantage in numbers could be neutralized.
I think this was one of those times that the moment was comprehended, that people realized that they had to make a stand, and that if they had not made a stand, the problem would not be that the Persians would just cross this one particular pass, but rather that morale among the Greeks would just sink into the lowest point and they would lose the war.
If the Greeks can hold them at Thermopylae, then in some ways the Persian army will eat itself out of its own home. It's like some great monster that continually has to be fed.
The Spartans were led by King Leonidas, a veteran of many campaigns during his 11-year reign. But to win this war, he would be called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice.
The oracle at Delphi had said that either the king of Persia would conquer Sparta or a Spartan king must die. Leonidas was well aware of this oracle. He was also, I think, aware that if the Greeks were going to put up effective resistance to the Persians after Thermopylae, there had to be a glorious moment. There had to be something to make your heart swell.
With fire in his belly, Leonidas handpicked his men for what was surely a suicide mission.